like to call to order the Clarkston Independence District Library Board of Trustees meeting for November 11th at 6:30. Let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Jan Gaffney.
Here.
Tim Holcomb.
Here.
Allison McDaddy-Gislin.
Here.
Nancy Moon.
Here.
Alan Panther.
Here.
Randall Pomeroy.
Here.
Maggie Sands.
Here.
Very good.
I'll accept a motion for approval of the agenda.
So before we approve the agenda,
Yes.
in your little pile of handouts, there was a request by the Historical Society to use the library for their holiday party on a Friday night after hours. And so if we could add that to the bottom of the agenda to have a conversation about that.
Okay.
I have included a meeting agenda item 1 at the bottom of the pile.
Okay, so that will be number 4. Okay, so I'll accept a motion for an amended agenda.
I will move that we approve the agenda as amended. Second.
We moved and seconded that we approve the agenda as amended. Any comments or questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion is carried. Time for a call to the public. So windy, they weren't able to get out tonight. Okay. Next is a public hearing on the 2025 budget, which is commencing at 6:32. No one is making any comments. So the hearing is closed at 6:33. We have a long consent agenda tonight, 12 items. I'll expect a motion.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Does anyone have a question about any of the 12 items? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion is carried. Friends of the Library report.
Good evening. We had a busy time. On the 10th, we had our regular Friends board meeting, and we had a policy review on that. On the 18th, we had our trunk or treat, which was very successful. Was it 36 vendors or 35, Julie?
I think 36.
I think 36. So we had 1,500 people.
Wow.
We gave away almost 900 books. And that was supported by the Friends. And as kind of a bonus, afterward, Lauren Batis from General RV sent us a $500 check. And on the 16th, we had our general membership meeting in the fall. And unfortunately, we only had 4 people that attended. And Sissy was voted as a Friend of the Year this year. And well-deserved. She's a very, very hard worker. As of our board positions, I'm going to be president. Our president-elect is open, following in 2025. Our secretary, Linda Welch, is going to remain, and Missy Huntoon, our treasurer, is going to remain. And as a highlight, we had Neil Parr speak about the vault. Very, very interesting. And we also had a little discussion about increasing volunteers. So we haven't come to a consensus on anything yet.
That's a universal question.
Yeah,
It is.
it's a big challenge.
It is a big challenge. I agree.
Thank you.
You are welcome.
Library statistics.
Okay, the statistical report you have in front of you this evening is the corrected version of what you got last month. They did discover what the issues were. The circulation statistics, it's supposed to be total circulation, and what they inadvertently did with the 2024 numbers as opposed to the 2023 numbers is when we run our circulation report, there's multiple columns, and the first column is the first time we check something out, and then the second column is if it gets renewed, and then the third column is total, so both. And apparently when they did the circulation statistics for this particular report, the one you saw last month, they only did those initial checkouts and didn't take into consideration checkouts when items get renewed, because that is an additional checkout. So that's why that number was low last month, and when we put it back in, circulation did go up. So that was where that came from. So other than that, these are statistics you've already seen, but that was a corrected number.
Okay. Any questions or comments on the statistics?
No.
Okay. Director's report.
Okay, for the past several months, the library has been negotiating with Windstream with the oversight of the Michigan Public Service Commission to finalize the billing of our 3 canceled analog phone lines. At last month's meeting, we had received notification that Windstream would be crediting $13,144.54, but we're that incorporated that credit. That only received an invoice for $592.24, as well as notification that it would be sent to collections if not paid immediately. So we cut the check, mailed it, and notified Windstream that it had been sent. We will wait to see if we receive further communications from Windstream before closing our complaint with the MPSC. So it's mostly done. Just dotting I's and crossing T's on that one. The library recently posted for a part-time administrative assistant for accounts payable. We have received 7 applications. The selection committee will be Jan Gaffney, Nicole Evans, and me. We are reviewing the submissions on Wednesday and hope to set up interviews next week. In the meantime, Melissa Schulman, our contracted accountant, has been assisting us with accounts payable and some other tasks to ensure that we are still maintaining appropriate segregation of financial duties. Oakland County Historical Resources is a collection of libraries created in 2005 using grant funds from the Library of Michigan to share the cost of a server to house digitized historical documents, photos, etc. In our case, we have been housing our digitized newspapers and high school yearbooks. Unfortunately, the work involved in the upkeep of this type of database has exceeded what this small collaboration can handle on its own. Other companies can now provide the service more efficiently, so the group has decided to disband. We have until December to remove our documents from the server and transition them to another server. Fortunately, our documents are primarily text, so we have more options than libraries that are housing images, audio, or video files. Our IT manager is looking into transferring the files to Documents on Demand, which is a low-cost solution that will still allow them to be searchable. It is not an ideal solution, but it should suffice while we investigate a more permanent option. We do have a couple of things that we're working on, but we're just not quite ready for those yet. As reported in September, the Friends of the Library has been assisting us with the installation of 2 additional Little Free Libraries. Last week, the Little Free Library, painted by local artist Mary Hartz, was installed at Bridgewater Apartments. The other Little Free Library will be painted by local artist Kathy Cordair in the coming month or so, and will be installed at North Asheville Elementary. And you can see on the second page of your report the pictures of the one that we just installed. So, a picture of it installed, and then pictures of the other 3 sides of it. So she did a beautiful job on it.
Yes.
We are very grateful for her volunteering to do that. That was very kind of her. And last, today is Veterans Day, and while it is traditional for governmental entities to be closed, as an organization of lifelong learning, we have chosen to be open to assure our services are available to veterans and the community at large. Since October 21st, we have been collecting candy as part of the Treats for Troops campaign. Today is the last day of our collection, and we are excited to announce that we collected nearly 500 pounds of treats to share. With the financial assistance of the Friends of the Library, we have created care packages and are shipping these goodies to a list of veterans, hospitals, and Army bases provided by the Treats for Troops organization. We are grateful to our military members that have served and those that continue to serve.
Excellent.
Sissy's been hauling candy all over the building for us.
It's a lot.
It is a lot of fun.
That's excellent.
Yes. So.
All right, let us move to regular business. And number one is the approval, review and approval of the 2025 budget.
All right. So. I didn't make copies of my presentation. Our internet has been a little bit sketchy today. So
It happens.
it happens, yeah. So it's just been sort of a wild day in that regard, but it happens. Anyway, technology is working. So first thing is, I'm putting up this Stop the Frenzy, the cost of hallucinated urgency. We talked about this a little bit at our budget workshop. Expectations around pace are so ingrained in us that we barely see them. Faster is better, and life becomes a competition where speed is the prime category to be judged against. But it's an illusion. Time isn't moving faster, you are. So the reason I bring this up is because normally when we do our budget, we do the millage rate approval in September, and the attorney really likes it when we do the budget actually in September as well. Except that most of the insurance premiums and a lot of the information that we need in order to calculate a good budget don't actually arrive until October. Legally, we don't actually need to have our budget done until December 31st. So this year, because we were struggling with things like the changes to minimum wage and changes to healthcare and those kinds of things, we pushed back a little bit and decided to do the budget either in November or December. And I will tell you, it has made my job so much easier. And I feel like we're getting a cleaner budget this year because I was able to use actual numbers instead of estimates. So thank you for helping me through this and for being patient while we did this a little bit later than normal. I hope the community will also be okay with that, because I would like to propose that we continue to do this in the future because it works so much better. Okay. So having said that, I want to go over just briefly so everybody knows what the steps in budget preparation are. Sometimes these get done in different order, but basically the first thing we do is a review of the Detroit Suburban Library Roundtable, known as DSLRT, annual wage data. We review potential capital projects for the coming year. We prepare a draft of the budget. We have a budget workshop with the board. We do a public hearing for the millage rate. The library board approves the L4029 tax rate request form, the public hearing for the 2025 budget, and then the library board approves the 2025 budget. And as I said, they can kind of go in different order, but these are the basic steps. The reality is the budgeting process for us here is an ongoing process. We have a spreadsheet that I do a save as. The minute you approve this budget, I do a save as of that budget, and we're already looking at 2026. It's a living, breathing document. The department heads and I work on it at all times. You will see the main page of the budget, and then there's all these tabs that are the subsets of the budget. And we write notes to each other in those sub-tabs that help me write the budget. And we make notes of this has changed, or we only pay for this every 3 years, or wow, we need more money in this line item, and they'll make notes, and it makes it so much easier for me to do that. So the additional elements this year that we ran across, quotes for database service agreements renewals, those usually come between August and October. Changes to minimum wage, that didn't get finalized until October. Insurance premiums, information that's always released in October. And our strategic plan retreats were also October 23rd and 24th. So pushing this budget back, as I said before, this was really helpful. We were able to incorporate a lot of these things into the budget process. And once again, just those legal requirements. The public hearing on the millage rate, that has to be done by September 30th. And then the deadline for the budget, that public hearing and that board approval has to happen by December 31st. So we are well within the timeline of doing that. We have already done that first legal requirement at September 30th millage rate. So you may remember when we did this back in September. This is our L4029. Basically what it says is that the board, or that the community approved the millage renewal of 1.1687. Headley has rolled that down for us this year to 1.1625. And the board went ahead and approved that, and we sent that out to the county and the clerk at the township and at the city. So this is the budget as it is written. You do have that not only in your packet, but you also have a handout of it next to you to make it very easy to get to. I'm going to break it into 3 parts. So what I usually do, I'm trying to do this without tripping over any cords. The first thing we do is we do this bottom part, which is the revenue. We'll go over those pieces of the revenue. Then I go up to the top, and we do the wages, and then we do the operating. But this is what the whole document looks like when it's all together. So hopping into revenues, as I said, 1.1687 approved by the voters in 2022 has rolled us down to 1.1625 this year. State aid, penal fines, and E-rate were fairly stable in 2024. Fines and fees and duplicating and photocopying have been increasing. Interest has been shifted to an investment structure for future use. And the library will have a total estimated operating revenues of approximately $2,758,654, which is an increase of approximately $163,387. Okay. Moving on. So the 2025 budget variables, minimum wage increase of $2.15 per hour affects all wages. That was released 10/1 of 2024. There was an 8% increase in healthcare costs. The strategic plan discussions, obviously, in October. We do have 7 employees reaching longevity anniversaries that change retirement contributions in 2025. And we will see a continuing shift in the use of downloadable versus physical materials affecting the budget in terms of both expenses and staff workload. So library staffing costs. Staffing usually accounts for 50 to 65% of the library's budget. Staffing costs have been between 59 and 61% since 2017 and will be maintained at 61% in 2025. In 2024, accruing sick time for part-time employees was implemented in anticipation of pending changes to state law. This will become a requirement in February of 2025. Our system has been in place for several months and is already running smoothly. While some adjustments will be needed for the coming year, strategic rollout of this new benefit prevented an undue implementation burden in 2025. So thank you, board, for working on that last year, getting that in place. Made this a lot easier to write this year. Healthcare premiums, as I said, increased 8%, and staffing changes have also had some effect on those benefits totals. Just actually, it pulled them down a little bit because we've had some changes in how many people were covering. State law will adjust the minimum wage, which is $10.33 in 2024, to $12.48 in 2025, $13.29 in 2026, $14.16 in 2027, and $14.97 in 2028. So this is the first year, and it's the biggest jump, but we will be seeing some increases going forward. And so we're trying to take this in little bite-sized chunks and make adjustments accordingly. The job market continues to be competitive. Each year, the Library Board Staffing Committee reviews DSLRT data, an annual survey of the finances, operations, and services of all 6 class sizes of libraries in southeastern Michigan. CIDL is a Class 5 library, so data libraries of this class size are used to make those decisions to help retain good employees and stay in line with similarly sized neighboring libraries. Recommendations were made for adjustments to wage ranges, which we'll talk about in a minute, and then individual wages on a graded scale within those ranges. So in the little pile of papers that you had next to you tonight, you also have a wage schedule for all of the employees. And so we do have, we have a handful of employees that are at minimum wage. Those are our shelters, our pages. They're in the middle under circulation. So you'll see that head of circulation. You'll see the department heads are all in blue, and that divides that nice list into the various departments. Our full-time employees are in green. And then all the white ones are our part-time employees, and you can see those pages underneath circulation where we made those adjustments. And then we did sort of a graded scale all the way up to assure that everything was coming out there. And that we weren't having the bottom bumping into the next, bumping into the next. Any questions about any of those?
You notice that it takes a long time to sort all of that out, so we appreciate all the work the staff has done.
It was a lot of sorting, and we were able to make some adjustments and some changes. Everybody is getting a bump up this year. Not some of them are a little bit bigger than others, depending on, as I said, you've got the minimum wage at the bottom. That's a pretty good sized jump. We did make a couple of corrections based on changes in workload for a couple of employees. So you'll see there are a couple of larger jumps that are a little bit higher on the scale, and those are due to changes in workload. Any questions on any of those?
No question on the current, but I do think as a board it's incumbent upon us by the time we get to 27 and 28 that's going to be a sizable piece of our budget when you have to not just take up the bottom wages, but you adjust the whole team accordingly.
Yeah.
And I think that Julie and this team have done a really good job of keeping expenses low and the cost of running the library low, but this will be completely out of hands, and so we're just going to have to decide how we want to manage through that, because it'll be a sizable cost increase for running the library.
So one of the things that we are doing, we talked a little bit about this at the budget workshop, prior to the pandemic, we were incredibly good at tracking the traffic in our building and making sure that we were making the most of our employees and scheduling them accordingly. So we were scheduling, obviously, in a retail model, more people when we're really busy and less people when we're not as busy. The pandemic turned that all upside down. We are finally starting to see some patterns again, but in order to speed up that process, I am investigating, along with our IT manager, Sensors, which is the traffic software that we use right now at our front door. Their sensors can be used in more general locations and are used in places, not only libraries, but also in places like amusement parks and larger venues. And we can use that to sort of track patterns of when are the desks often busy and when are they less busy, and use that to help us schedule wisely, as opposed to, wow, we're not sure if it's going to be busy, so we're going to schedule 2 people just in case, and then finding out that it's not as busy as we thought it was going to be. So we already do that in terms of paying attention to, obviously, programs and things like that. I can assure you, after story time, it's crazy up at the circulation desk, so we want to make sure there's extra people there after holidays, those kinds of things. Those are obvious. But now we're trying to learn what the patterns of our public are, and this would be a great way to do that. So we're in the process of taking the photos and sending them to Sensor so that they are able to kind of show us what would be able to be tracked in these various locations. And the really cool thing about this is we've already got this system in place, and it has a really nice dashboard that we can then share with those people who are scheduled the service desks, and they can program it to automatically email the traffic pattern reports to them at key points when they're about to do scheduling. So it will automatically send them that report, and they can start to look at things. Oh wow, Wednesday nights are now really busy. We should be looking into that and figuring out how to manage that. So we're trying to be smart about how to do that. That's good use of the employees. It doesn't necessarily cut their hours. It means we're scheduling them when it's best. And then they're not standing around, which makes your shift go really slow. So, any questions about that? No. Okay. We're trying to be proactive. Okay. So in terms of wages and benefits, this is the top part of that grid. You'll see that full-time and part-time have gone up. You'll see that there was an increase to the health insurance. But with all of this kind of working around, looking at the average number of hours of each of the employees, and working out, we have maintained 61%, which I'm very proud to say it's some doing, but we figured it out. So, and this is something that we had talked about at the budget workshop, and how important that was, because we want to make sure that if there is ever an economic issue, like we had in 2008, 9, and 10, we don't want to punish the employees when that happens. We want to be able to be prepared for that. Okay, so this is our organizational chart. So the director up at the top, and then across we have our full-time head of adult services, head of children's services, and children and teen services, head of technical services, our IT manager, our head of circulation, our head of marketing and engagement, and our facilities coordinator. And then underneath that we have some full-time employees, and then we have all of our part-time employees, and you can see how this structure kind of works together. Any questions about our organizational structure? We didn't change anything this year. Okay, so wage ranges. So this is our wage range grid for part-time. So you can see in green, I don't know if you can see green on my screen, but you have green in front of you in your packet. Green is 2024 minimum hourly wage range and 2024 maximum hourly wage range for each of these part-time positions. In the center is that DSLRT data. So how do we get those numbers in the center? We basically take our class 5 data and we take an average. And we try to stay in the center of the grid, because this range includes everybody from the smaller class 5s that are maybe not as well funded as we are, all the way up to the larger class 5s, Birmingham, for example, that are a little bit out of our price range. And we try to find that happy medium. The thing that we do take into consideration when we look at these numbers is also our closest neighbors. And I'm going to go ahead and call out the Oregon Township Library, which is very demographically similar to us, and budget-wise is very similar to us. And it's also very easy for us to lose our employees to them. So we obviously keep a pretty close eye on their wage ranges as they do with ours. So some of these wage ranges were adjusted somewhat a little bit on what their wage ranges are. And as soon as I do the data here in November for DSLRT and it goes out to all the libraries, they'll be looking at it as doing the same. Okay, so these are our full-time. All of our full-time employees from the director all the way to the outreach coordinator. Everything that is bolded has been changed. The one thing we did not change was the maximum director, which is in a good phase. But everything else, we've made an adjustment based on what was going on with these other libraries, including the building. This was a nice long conversation with the staffing committee. Thank you, staffing committee, for helping me go through all these number crunching processes.
It was a bit of a challenge this time.
It was a bit of a challenge this time.
It was fun.
It's never done.
No, it's not though.
It's never done. Okay, so operational cost assumptions. Significant growth continues in downloadable e-collections, obviously. We've been talking about that every month when we look at the statistics. The completion of the strategic plan will shift funds from contract services to the implementation of projects that support our new strategic priorities. Participation in programs and outreach activities will continue to grow. The ability and interest in in-person networking and professional development opportunities has been increasing amongst the staff. And building and ground maintenance costs will stabilize as we catch up with maintenance projects that were deferred during the pandemic. So the first version of this packet that you saw that went out to you, it actually had building and ground maintenance at $154,000. And Arlene came to me at the 11th hour and said, I only need 145. And I'm like, seriously, you're giving up 10 grand? And she said, yes. So she feels that she has spent the last couple of years really working on making sure that we have a good handle on what we need to do, and so that extra money has kind of shifted to the bottom of the budget, and we can use it for other purposes. Probably capital projects of some sort, but that's children's board. Okay, so this is our operational costs list. This is that middle section that I talked about. And I'm going to go through kind of item by item and help you understand what it is that we're changing. I know it's out here, so we can leave this up so everybody can see it. Okay. Okay, so the staffing costs adjusted in response to the increase in the minimum wage, DSLRT data, and the competitive job market with the percentage of the operating budget. I'm just going to keep saying this because I'm so proud we were able to do this at 61%. It took some doing, so I get to brag. Okay, adjustments to insurance and benefits costs based on premiums and staffing changes. An increase in audit fees reflects the anticipated change as our previous contract expires. Well, this isn't as it expires, but as the next round of that proposed amount increases a little bit. The investment in collections, so books, subscriptions, and audiovisual, will be raised to the Library of Michigan Quality Services Audit Checklist, that's known as QSAC, recommended level of 12%. The majority of this additional funding will go to downloadable e-collections to reduce wait times and improve user experience. So why were we not at 12% before? I'm going to be very honest. Over the course of the last 4 years during the pandemic, publishing companies were falling way behind in producing materials. And so we kind of let that budget sort of sit where it was, even though the budget actually increased a little bit. We wanted to make sure that we weren't just putting money and holding it when we weren't actually able to spend that money. Now we are seeing this growth. We're still seeing some growth in our physical materials, but we are seeing a lot of growth, as you've seen in those statistics, in those e-collections. And so we pumped a lot of money into that this year. The other thing that we need to do is take into consideration that we had one person in charge of our e-collections, whereas if you look at the rest of our collections, we have it divided by departments. So the adult department divides up all of the physical collections, and the children's department divides up their physical collections. We have multiple people working on that. So Neil, our innovations librarian, his primary collection, his main collection, is all the downloadable stuff, which means he's doing across the age band. That's a huge collection for one person to do. So we are now dividing that out, and you're seeing some of those corrections you're seeing in salary are taking into consideration that we have people who will become a team working with Neil to manage that collection and to keep an eye on the children's and the teen things so that he can focus primarily on adult. And he will lead that little team in terms of being the one who will attend the meetings and things like that, but he will have assistance in making that happen because we pumped a lot of money into that collection this year. Any questions about that? Okay. So you'll remember from that strategic plan learning report, that was the one thing that we heard in terms of collections, is that the collections are good, but there was concerns about the wait times and things like that. The other thing that we're going to do, and I was really excited when this happened, is I was actually talking to one of our librarians about the way to use our e-collections. So when you use Libby, for example, Libby is an actual curated collection of materials. And so when you check something out from Libby, you have it checked out, and if somebody else wants to check it out, they have to put it on hold. The other service that we use is Hoopla. Hoopla is an on-demand. There's 426,000 items in Hoopla, and if you want it, you just get it, and it's always there. So the difference is when we curate Libby, we pay for a collection of materials. When we curate Hoopla, we pay every time somebody checks something out. Just two different payment models for supplying these collections. So we limit people in how many of those on-demand items they can have so that we can kind of manage the budget. The thing that we are doing is trying to help teach our community to be power users. So the people who are getting the biggest bang for their buck out of these services are the people that go into, for example, Libby, and use their favorites or the wish list to mark everything that they would like to read. And then when they need something, they go in, and if they want it, they put it on hold or they check it out. If something that they want to put on hold is going to be available for several weeks, great, now what do? I want something else. You've got this great wish list you can look at. Let's say there's nothing on that wish list that you really want. Then you go into Hoopla, and you have also favorited all of the things in Hoopla that you love. And those are on demand and ready and available when you're about to get on the plane. And you can get it at your leisure. So we're trying to take time and make it possible for all of our users to be power users and to know how to use these two services together, because that's how they're intended to be used. So the thing that I was really excited about is I was having this conversation with one of our librarians, and she was like, oh, I didn't even think about doing it that way. And one of the other librarians walked up and started saying, oh yeah, and you can also do this, and oh, and if you use this, and she was going through this whole thing and said, we're going to have you team up with Neil, and we're going to have some more trainings for the public and maybe some videos on our website and things that would help the public learn to use these services to their best advantage.
Yes.
And she was very excited to do that. So I'm excited that they're going to be working together, and she will be part of that collections team as well. We like to tap people for the things that they're passionate about, and obviously she's well versed in this, as she's a power user herself, and who's the best person to teach people to be a power user but a power user. So. Okay, any questions about the collections? Okay, so professional contract services will actually be reduced as funds to execute strategic planning or transition to implementation of priorities. So one of the things we did talk about is setting some money aside to do a building assessment, and I did put that in there, so that is budgeted. We did an increase in conferences and workshops as the reliance on exclusively virtual training recedes and the availability of in-person training. So last year we saw, well, 2 years ago, everybody was saying, oh, it's all webinars, oh, it's all virtual, and it was very inexpensive, and so we kind of shifted some money away from training because there just wasn't a lot going on. And then last year, all of the conferences were back in play, and people decided they were willing to go to these various conferences and wanted to travel again, and we had a lot of interest from the staff. So I have put some extra money in there this year so that we can accommodate some of those requests, because there's some really great stuff out there right now. There is a reduction in buildings and ground maintenance budget as we catch up on maintenance, and thank you, Arlene, for being so efficient. Her budget is probably, on those tabs I was telling you about, hers is the longest and the most detailed, and she does it online, and then she prints it out, and she makes all of her notes on paper, and then she goes in and puts it back in. So she's very, very organized and very detail-oriented about making sure we are wisely spending that line item. So I like to give her kudos for that as well. The equipment maintenance has been increased to accommodate increased costs of maintenance agreements, and some expenditures were transferred into this line from other budget lines for more efficient tracking. So there were a few things that we had in our subscriptions line item that we decided we wanted to keep our subscriptions lines primarily collection related as opposed to service related. And so anything that is really, if I can think of an example off the top of my head that had been in there, it was more of a service. For example, Canva, which is a graphic design software, was in our subscriptions because it was a subscription to a software, but it's not part of our collection. So the things that are in there now are things like the Mango languages. That's a service. That would be that's something directly for the public, whereas Canva is something for the staff. So we pushed anything that was for the staff into that equipment maintenance line item and kept that subscription line as primarily collections and public service. So it's a little bit easier when I do the state aid report to kind of tease those things out. The equipment budget has been reduced. The library maintains a 3-year technology plan that allows for proactive planning regarding replacement of heavily used computers and servers. Each year, approximately 1/3 of the library's electronics are evaluated for planned replacement. In 2024, the replacement was for servers, which are more expensive than computers. So 2024 was high, and 2025 will be lower. It's not that we're doing anything less important, but those servers are a lot more expensive. So, any questions about any of that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is there no budget for building?
We're getting to that.
Okay.
Actually, that's the next page of the day. So capital improvements. So there were 2 projects in the budget for 2024 that are not complete. A budget adjustment may be needed to transfer the remaining funds from 2024 into 2025 to complete that work. So the 2 projects that we were working on, the replacement of the 4 small HVAC units and the plumbing upgrades to the men's room in the lobby. So before we take on, I don't like to start a new project until we're pretty well done with the first project. And these projects are going to carry over into next year, and Arlene would like to continue them on. So when we get to the end of the year, whatever hasn't been paid for, I will come to the board and ask, as it transfers to funding, can you transfer this money forward into 2025 to help pay for those? The other reason that there's not a lot in the building is because since we did strategic planning this year, the projects we would like to work on may need to be adjusted based on that implementation plan. So the implementation plan is coming from our strategic planning consultant. Actually, I think it landed in the draft that landed in my inbox today, and I didn't have time to look at it. But there are a number of things that are, I think, that are going to be in there that we would like to do that would be strategic plan related. And instead of just putting that money in that line item, what I did, this last page. What I did was I let it hang out at the bottom, and our auditor may tell me he doesn't like this, but I did it anyway. So here are all the things that we budgeted for. There's the revenues, the staffing, and at the bottom, this is the total budget. And basically what it does is it takes this final number and it subtracts from this full number. And so we've got some money sitting down here at the bottom. And that money down there at the bottom, I usually call it unassigned revenue. And it says it's $47,000, but with the change that Arlene provided, it bumps up a little bit. Essentially, that would be funds that as soon as January hits, and you all look at that strategic plan implementation, and you say, wow, we want to do X, Y, Z, that money can then be plugged in at your leisure. So we'll leave it hanging out there at the bottom, and then you can make that decision when we all know what we would like to do with those funds. So it's a little bit of a miscellaneous, but I like to leave it at the bottom so that you understand that it's unassigned at this time. Any questions?
Yeah, everyone mind.
Okay. Well, it's a little bit of an unusual thing, but I like to do it so that it's clear that we're...
All I'm doing is budgeting and access of revenues over expenditures is all I'm doing. So then you'll amend it in the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So the only cost for building is going to be the transferred over money, or do you anticipate that we will have other?
I anticipate there will be other things that you'll want to do, but at this point I don't want to say what those are because I feel like we want to look at that implementation plan first. We were talking about a number of things in that implementation. I know at the board retreat we talked a lot about things like outreach and community engagement. We also talked about technology, and we talked about building assessment, and those 3 things could affect capital improvements. And until we know what direction we're going to go with some of these things, we may want to step back and think about what the smart things are to do in terms of investing that money. For example, community and engagement and outreach might mean that we want to do more with Makerspace. What could we potentially do with Makerspace? We could potentially change one of our rooms to accommodate into a Makerspace. So that would be a capital improvement, like if we wanted to add cabinetry or things of that nature. But until we really look at that implementation plan, I don't want to commit to anything. Because I feel like we would change our minds once we see what that really says.
Can I ask one follow-up question?
Of course.
On the fund balance, what is our, you reminded me from our budget meetings earlier this year?
The total?
Yeah.
So if you actually can see it all in the reconciliation reports that are in the board packet.
Okay, great.
Yep, it's all invested now, and so it's very obvious where those pieces are. But it's about $3 million.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Any other questions? So as the year comes to a close, we reflect on all that we learned in our strategic planning project. Obviously, the implementation plan, as I said, is almost complete. And our priorities are community engagement and collaboration, technology, and an assessment of the library space. Our goal has been to focus on our residents' needs and input in our strategic plan project, provided a wealth of feedback to do that. In regard to putting a spotlight on the enthusiasm the community has for the library. We had 92% approval rate on that earning report, as you remember, which is unbelievably positive. So based on that input, we will focus our energy on the innovations that provide the educational and enriching library services the community needs and wants from. Okay.
Thank you for a thorough presentation. That's why it helps to have a workshop.
Yes. There's a lot of detail.
Are there any questions or comments on the presentation? If not, we're ready for a motion to approve the resolution establishing the budget.
I move that we approve the resolution as attached.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the resolution establishing the Clarkston Independence District Library 2025 budget as presented. If there are any comments or questions, let's have roll call.
Jan Gaffney,
Yes.
Tim Holcomb,
Yes.
Allison McFadden-Kiesling,
Yes.
Nancy Moon,
Yes.
Alan Fisher,
Yes.
Marilyn Pomeroy,
Yes.
Maggie Sands.
Yes.
Motion is approved. I'll also accept a motion to approve the updated wage ranges in the 2025 wage schedule.
I'll make a motion to approve the updated wage ranges and 2025 wage schedule as presented.
I'll second.
Okay.
Or Allison will.
Very good, have we got that? It's been moved and seconded to approve the updated wage ranges in the 2025 wage schedule as presented. Any comments or questions on that? I'd like to thank the staffing committee for their work in that area. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion is carried. Item number 2, to rescind the outdated policies from the COVID years.
Okay. So during the pandemic, policies addressing specific situations were written by our attorney and approved by the library board. These included an electronic participation in meetings procedure and a remote work policy during the pandemic. Post-pandemic changes to the Open Meetings Act disallow remote participation in meetings, and a better understanding of the management of remote work make these policies outdated. Because they were board approved, they need to be rescinded by the board to be eliminated. And I checked in with the attorney and she said, yep, tell them to rescind them if you'd like them off the books.
Seems like it was not that long ago. Are we ready to rescind? I'll accept a motion.
I'll move that we rescind the policies.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that we rescind the electronic participation procedure and the remote work during the pandemic policy. Any comments or questions?
Good riddance.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion is carried. Now, we have to have a different remote work policy. Number 3.
Okay. So remote work has become a great way to make workplaces more flexible. However, a public library is primarily an in-person operation. Serving the public and supervising operations must be balanced with the struggle that our workspace can be undersized for our staff. This remote work policy was developed by the leadership team to address the need for flexibility that prioritizes staff with shared workspaces while assuring that the ability for some employees to work remotely does not lay undue burden on other employees. Clear guidelines are the key to successful balance of in-person and remote work in a busy public library. So this policy was developed by the library's leadership team in collaboration with the library's labor attorney. And we do have a labor attorney that does specifically. Dan Suring is our library attorney, and then Mike Bloom is our labor attorney. And this is Mike's project.
So we had a committee that worked on this.
Oh, yes. Yes.
The leadership group.
The leadership team worked on this. And we used a couple of really good examples that we found, and then kind of built it from there. One from a library that was about the same size as us, and one from an organization that was much bigger than we are, and that helped us a lot. And then we had some template from the attorney as well, and we kind of pieced together the pieces that make the most sense to us, and came up with something that I think will solve some issues and clarify some things. And everybody seemed pretty happy with it at the end. So that's good.
And it is an issue when you're essentially an in-house service provider.
Yep.
It makes it harder to work from home. But certain projects can be done remotely, but it's quieter and we don't have a lot of workspace.
One of the things that we're struggling with and we want to make sure that we're prioritizing is those people that are in shared workspaces. And even some of our employees that are normally doing jobs that don't really work as work from home, for example, our circulation staff, it doesn't mean that there aren't opportunities for them to work from home. For example, if we want them to do a webinar on conflict resolution, they work at a public service desk, and we do not have enough room in the back to just kind of stick them in the back so they can do this webinar. And so we can have them sign this work from home policy, this remote work policy, and pay them for those kinds of things and do that at home. So there are opportunities for all of our employees to be able to do that, since our building is a little bit undersized for some of those things.
That's a great example of when it seems to make sense for a library.
Yes.
Because I do think the workforce in general has moved from quite an expansive work from home to, I think the business community has found that it has not always been the most efficient choice, and the pendulum is swinging back to a more work at work, if you will, place. And so it's important to keep our eye on the trends and what others are learning so we can follow suit and learn from that. So thank you.
We learned pretty quickly during the pandemic that a lot of the magic in this place happens in that undersized workspace that we have. Because those conversations that happen in the hallway is sometimes where the best stuff is come up with. The most creativity happens in those little, me having the conversation with the librarian and another one walks up and says, hey, this is how we do power user work with our hoopla and our Libby services.
Correct.
Yeah, those are the kinds of things that happen in the hallway.
Okay.
I have one, the way I read it, it appears to need a correction at the top of page 2 in that first section.
Yes.
And it says to ensure that viruses are not transmitted to library equipment. Then it says, and that data is affected. I feel like that should say data is not affected.
Oh, okay. Yep.
It is also, should be R. Should be R, not is.
The data are affected?
It's not affected.
It's unaffected, or that would work, but the way it reads right now.
Got it. It was the R that I wasn't sure about.
It's not unaffected by.
It's unaffected by virus infection.
Yeah.
Is or R? I'm sorry.
Nancy's, I think,
Was it
suggesting it R.
data R?
I think it is. I don't know, but
I think.
I'll let you do it. I suggest you do the grammar on it.
That's-
Yeah.
I'll let them read it.
Yeah, my main
Data's
concern is
generally
that the
considered
data
plural.
is not effective or is
Singular.
unaffected, so, or are.
I will correct that to whatever. My background, I was a science major, not a.
Well, I feel like what Nicole said, data is technically the plural, but I think that based on common usage, it's treated as singular.
This is a formal policy, we should get from
Anyway, we don't want the data unaffected.
So that is it.
Okay, I'll accept the motion.
And I'll put as corrected.
I make a motion to approve the remote work policy as presented with correction.
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the remote work policy as corrected. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Yeah. Oh, no. I already voted aye. Instinct.
It's that double voting you have to put
Yeah,
out.
no, you look choked.
I think maybe our brains are fried from
Yes.
all the numbers.
That's right. Motion is approved. Okay, number 4.
Okay, so request to host an after-hours event. The Clarkston Community Historical Society purchased a space in the library when the building was built in 1992. Over the years, it has transformed from storage to an office space to a museum with exhibits that change 2 to 3 times per year. As a nonprofit entity, the Historical Society hosts a holiday party each year, which is a fundraising event. It is usually hosted at a private home in the Historic District, but this year the Historical Society would like to host the party at the library after hours on Friday, December 6th. This would be a good venue because of the size, ample parking, and the opportunity for attendees to enjoy the museum they help fund. This is a ticketed event, and it has been tradition for beer and wine to be served. Alcohol is not usually allowed in the library, so the Historical Society is asking the library board to consider the request to use the building after hours, as well as approve an exception for alcohol to be served at this event. So, library's attorney was contacted, so I talked to Ann again, and then Ann referred me to Amanda. Amanda Dernovshek, the attorney in their firm that specializes in this area. Because this is a ticketed event, the Historical Society would be required to file for a special liquor license from the state of Michigan. So it's not the library filing for it because it's not our event, it's just our building. It would be the Historical Society that would need to file for the license. And then the Historical Society and the library should also assure appropriate insurance coverage for this event that is outside of its normal operations. So I guess I'm opening it up for conversation at this point. This has been a request that's literally happened this morning. So
My comment would be I'll join in the discussion or act as a resource. I'll abstain from voting because I actually sit on the Historical Society board.
Okay.
How easy is it to get a special liquor license?
So it's actually an application that's just a few pages. They have to submit it at least 10 days prior to their event.
Which is getting close.
Which is getting really close, which is why I'm kind of hustling a little bit. And they have to state what it is they're going to do and answer a lot of questions about what the purposes of the funds are and that sort of thing. It doesn't look like it's a particularly difficult process.
And I don't think that the state is real restrictive on those as long as all of the stuff is all in order. I've seen groups get those special licenses, and I don't recall of really any or very many instances where I heard somebody was just not approved. So,
do they have to get special insurance then once they have?
So basically, they would need to call their insurance agent and make sure that there is added coverage, which the insurance agent, depending on the policy, might say, oh no, you're covered. Or they might say, oh, well, we're going to charge you X amount extra to cover this event. Basically, what they'll do is they'll weigh out the liability of the event itself. I'm not sure what the library should also check our coverage for it as well.
right, because it's our building.
The other thing that we can do is, that the attorney mentioned, is that we could require the Historical Society for this event to add us onto their policy for this particular coverage. In my personal opinion, I think we would be better off calling our own agent and making sure we're adequately covered, because we have more to lose if something should go sideways.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever had alcohol before the event?
Not in this building.
I do think that due to the parking and the fact that the Historical Society is housed here, so that they could actually see what their funds
right.
are paying for, I think that it's a good idea. It's just that the time constraint is a little tight this
I
year.
think Beth did it to them years ago, but they've always really enjoyed having it in a private home. Although I think part of what's going on is that the party's gotten a little bit too big for the private homes as well. I mean, it's hard to squeeze that many people into some of those houses.
Yeah.
It's a lot to ask a private homeowner to do.
I don't personally see a problem with it as long as the proper paperwork is provided, you know, to minimize our liability.
Right.
In case something happens.
That's my only concern. I had a reception this summer for my daughter, as you know, and we did not have alcohol at it, but even just getting the insurance for no alcohol was a lot of hoops. And it was at a local park, and they wanted to make sure that they were adequately covered.
Right.
So I guess that's my only concern, is I want to make sure, just as I made sure that they were adequately covered, I want to make sure that we're adequately
Right.
covered.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, but if they're able to get all of the documentation and maybe a quick, run it past our attorney and our insurance agent and make sure that we're adequately covered, then,
Right.
I think it is a nice event, and I think that they live here. So I feel like saying no under those circumstances is, not very friendly or neighborly of us.
Community oriented.
Well, I think we need to consider where you're going to allow food and drinks into the library.
I'll be honest, we've done it here before, when we do our own events, and we do it all over the building and clean it all up. It would be after hours, it would make it a little bit easier.
Because it's going to be a lot. I've been to this, and it's been at Maggie's house. It's a tremendous, tremendous amount of work for Arlene after the fact. It's a lot of work for Arlene and her staff after the fact. So,
I would suggest that maybe you'll find that the people who work on it are really diligent about cleaning.
well, it's just, but I mean, if food gets carried into where the leisurely chairs are sitting, and somebody accidentally drops drops a glass of wine or their drink or whatever.
Luckily, you'll notice our carpet is dark.
I mean, I think
It's
those
those
are
white
the,
carpets that are really a problem.
I think those are the things that we need to be aware of, that we are asking a lot of extra for Arlene, even though if the staff is great about collecting all the trash, there's going to be, Arlene is so meticulous. She's going around and scrub everything that anybody might have touched. So I think we need to be aware that situation's going to occur for her.
Maybe our motion should include that in.
I think it,
I will accept the motion.
Okay, what all are we including in this motion?
No,
I'll
I
make the
think
motion, but
we already-
so we're approving it conditional to the proper paperwork being provided and reviewed by our experts. And what provision are we making in terms of the cleanup, that the Historical Society will be responsible for cleaning costs if necessary, or something like that?
yeah, I would, because if there's something extra that we have to do,
Okay. I'll make the motion in that form.
Okay.
yeah, I'll second it.
You want to try and read it back, Nicole? I can probably help you because I don't too.
I said, motion made by Gaffney to approve conditional, I also worked with migraine brain, so maybe I shouldn't.
I put approved condition,
I said conditional to proper paperwork provided and reviewed, and that the Historical Society is responsible for cleaning costs.
That makes sense.
If that's,
Yeah, that's nice and
as
simple.
needed or something like that.
Yeah.
As needed, yeah.
for any added.
Yeah, it should be pretty added, yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
because I do think it will be really pretty well done. Of course, I don't know what it was like in your house afterwards.
Very good. Very good. Positive events in the past. Okay.
It's a wonderful event.
Okay, so we have the recommended motion to approve the use of the library for the Clarkston Community Historical Society party on Friday, December 6th, providing the appropriate liquor licensing, insurance coverage, and necessary cleanup. Yes, is that essentially what we're talking about? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. We've had some more discussion. Any more discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion is carried.
Those abstained, me.
Nicole, you'll need to make a note of that as well.
No conflict of interest here.
Yeah, that's right.
I will now accept a motion for adjournment.
So, I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded that we adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. We are adjourned at 7:30. Thank you very much.